小松でございます。それでは話を始めたいと思います。まず第一にですね、これが石巻の被災状況でございます。写真見れば全てを物語っていると思います。
Thank you for the kind introduction. These photos show the situation of the disaster-affected area in Ishinomaki City, and I think the photos are self-explanatory.
次が石巻の東側にあります女川という港の被災状況ですが、ここはほとんどのですね、建物が破壊されました。
This is Onagawa, which is located to the east of Ishinomaki City and the situation of the disaster. And you can see that in Onagawa, most of the buildings have been destroyed.
次がもう少し北に位置します、マグロとカツオの水揚げで有名な気仙沼市の状況です。
These photos show the disaster-affected areas in Kesennuma City, which is located to the northern direction. And Kesennuma is well known for tuna and bonito.
で、海面がですね、1メーター、陸地が1メーターぐらい、沈んだことがですね、右側の上の写真でわかります。
If you look at the top right-hand photo, you'll be able to see that the level of the ground has subsided by around 1 meter.
それから左下では市場が陥没しまして、水に浸かっています。
And on the bottom left-hand photo, you will be able to see the market, what used to be the market, which has sunk and underwater.
次が私の生まれ故郷の陸前高田市ですが、これは津波がですね押し寄せているシーンで、病院の4階からですね、上の医師が撮った写真です。遠くに見えている山がですね、これが私の生まれ故郷です。
These photos show Rikuzen Takadashi, which is my hometown. I was born and raised in this city. And which has been hit by the tsunami. And these photos were taken at the time of the tsunami by a doctor named Ueno, Mr. Ueno, from the fourth floor of the hospital. And the mountain that you see far ahead, that is where I was born.
で、これが陸前高田市の全景ですね、津波の後のですね。
So this shows the overall view of Rikuzen Takada after the tsunami.
で、陸前高田市の広田町っていうところで、ここが私の生まれたところで、この辺に私の生まれた家があったんですが、跡形もありません。
This is Hirota town in Rikuzen Takada city, and the house in which I was born used to be located around here. But it's gone entirely.
で、これも私の生まれ故郷の広田町ですが、一つの小さい港がここだけ陥没してますね。で、この港が守ってる船はこの小さいですね、1トンにも満たない船ですね。
These photos were also taken in my hometown, Hirota, and you'll be able to see that the seaport of Hirota is only suffering from a very partial subsidence, and the fishing boats which operate from this port are very small, as you can see, less than 1 ton.
こっちの港は養殖用で、ちょっと大きいんですね。
And this port is slightly larger, and this is for aquaculture.
で、ここに見えませんけど、昭和8年の1933年の津波でですね、低いところに家を建てるなってはっきり書いてあります。
You won't be able to read this, but here there is a slogan saying that you should never build your house in the lowland. a lesson learned from the big tsunami of 1933.
したがってはっきりものを言いますと、うちの田舎はこういう渓谷がありますから、ほとんど人は死んでません。広田町は死んでないんです。人は死んでません。
So if I may be very candid, as far as my hometown is concerned, because there was this warning, nobody lived in the lowlands, meaning that there are no victims who were deceased from Hirota, my hometown.
で、前に戻りますと、陸前高田市は1000人から2000人ぐらいの人が死んだりミッシングしてるんですが、そこにはそういう教訓もですね、警告も残ってなかったんです。
Going back to Rikuzen Takada city, 1,000 to 2,000 people are either dead or missing because there were no lessons from the past and no warning signs.
これが大船、この一つまた北の港の大船渡ですが、ここに防波堤が2つありました。
This is Ofunato town, which is located a bit to the north, and there used to be 2 seawalls.
で、第1波がですね、最初の津波ウェーブが来て全くなくなりました。
The first tsunami wave totally wiped out the seawall.
で、第2波はですね、沖合で7メーターですから、第1波が2メーターの高さですから、もう高さだけで 3.5 倍の津波が直接も湾に入りました。ですからここのですね、機能はほとんど果たせなかったわけですね。防波堤は機能しなかったということになります。
The first tsunami wave was 2 meters high, but the second tsunami wave was already 7 meters offshore, meaning that the height of the second wave was 3.5 times the height of the first. And therefore, since the seawall was already destroyed by the first wave, the second wave came directly into the bay, meaning that the seawall did not function at all.
これがですね、さらに大船渡の北、だいたい50キロぐらいの町なんですが、1933年の津波の後に、ここにあったすべての住居がですね、この辺15メーターぐらい高台にすべて移住しました。それで今はここは全部水田です。で、ここは今回は波をかぶりましたけども、死者は出ませんでした。
This is another town located about 50 kilometers north from Ofunato. And at the time of 1933, all of this area had housings. However, after the 1933 tsunami, they all moved to the highlands of about 50 meters high. And therefore, this lowland, they only had rice paddies. And therefore, although they were covered by the waves, from this town, there were no one dead.
で、今回のですね、被害は2万9000隻のうちのですね、大体 60%、5分の1間違いですが、1万7000隻がですね、全壊または一部破損です。ですけど、漁船はさっきお見せしたように、小さい船が写真でありました。ああいう船がほとんどです。
So this is the extent of the damage. In terms of the total number of 29,000 fishing boats, about 60%, that is to say 17,000 boats, were either totally destroyed or partially destroyed. But they were mostly small fishing boats, as were shown in the photo.
で、漁港はですね、北海道の21、それから青森の17、それ岩手はほとんど111、宮城の142、福島の10ですね。これが大きな被害を受けましたけれども、とりわけ大きいのはこの岩手県と宮城県です。
As for the damages inflicted on the fishing ports, For Hokkaido, 21, for Aomori Prefecture, 17, for Iwate Prefecture, 111, Miyagi Prefecture, 142, and for Fukushima Prefecture, 10 ports had major damages. However, out of this, the ports from Iwate and Miyagi prefectures were especially severely damaged.
で大きな港がまたいくつかありますが、その中で東北地方で大きいのは4つあります。八戸、石巻、塩釜、気仙沼、これを特定産州漁港と言います。
So there are a certain number of large-sized ports, and there are 4 in Tohoku area region. That is to say, Hachinohe, Ishinomaki, Shiogama, and Kesennuma, and they are called by the name of specified 3 types of seaports, fishing ports.
その中で石巻と塩釜、気仙沼はですね、もう全部壊滅的に破壊されました。
Out of which Ishinomaki and Kesennuma ports were devastated, totally annihilated.
八戸と塩釜はほとんど無傷です。
Whereas Hachinohe and Shiogama, they were able to survive without damages.
で、石巻も気仙沼もそうですが、港とですね、それから加工場両方とも破壊されましたが、そのロケーションはですね、全部埋め立て地にありました。
As for Ishinomaki and Kesennuma, both the port as well as the processing facilities were destroyed, but the location of such facilities were all on reclaimed land.
それから石巻と気仙沼でたくさんの人が亡くなりましたけれども、その人たちはですね、その埋め立て地の漁港のですね、それから工場の背後に住宅地ができて、そこの人たち、つまり埋め立て地の上に住居を作った人たちがですね、被害に遭いました。
Both in Ishinomaki and Kesennuma, there were numerous people who were deceased, but they mainly lived in housing, which were located at the back of the fishing ports or the processing plants, which all existed on reclaimed land, which means that the victims of the tsunami were from the housing area built on reclaimed land.
で、ちょっと東北地方のですね、漁業の状況を見てみたいと思いますが、日本の漁業生産量がこの青で示してありまして、東北のですね、養殖は入ってませんが、漁業生産量は300万トンぐらいあったのがですね、今100万トン弱ですね。
Let me give you the situation with regard to the fisheries industry in Tohoku region. In this graph, the blue bars show the total Japanese fisheries production. This does not include aquaculture, but the purple bars show the Tohoku region's fisheries production, which used to be 3 million tons at the peak, but now this has fallen to the level of 1 million tons.
で最近のですね、正確な漁業生産量は東北地方ではですね、約60万トンで、日本全体のですね、14% です。
The accurate figure for fisheries production from the recent years for Tohoku region is around 600,000 tons, which is accounting for about 14% of total Japanese production.
で、魚種別でウェイトが高いのはですね、サメですね。それからイカ、サメは気仙沼、イカは八戸、カツオ、これは石巻、マグロ、これは気仙沼、サンマはやはり気仙沼がウェイトが高いです。
Tohoku accounts for large shares of the following fish species: shark, that is for Kesennuma, and squid, that is for Hachinohe, and bonito for Ishinomaki, and tuna for Kesennuma, and Pacific Sori, which is also for Kesenuma.
それから沿岸の漁業の中では、沿岸に近い漁業の中では、定置網、大きいスケールの定置網のですね、漁獲のウェイトが高いですね。それは宮城県で2万5000トン、岩手県で4万5000トンで、主に定置網で鮭とですね、それからマグロを取ってます。黒マグロですね。
As for coastal fishing, Tohoku has a very high share in terms of large-sized set net fishing. For Miyagi, that'll be 25,000 tons, and for Iwate, 45,000 tons. And they are mainly fishing salmon and bluefin tuna.
で、養殖業はですね、全国の約 23% ですね、27万トンを占めております。で、ホタテ貝が全国の半分です。で、牡蠣は岩手と宮城で 29%、ホヤはですね、全国のすべて、わかめは宮城と岩手でほとんど全国のすべてを占めます。海苔は九州が生産の中心ですので、宮城で 7.8% です。
Turning to aquaculture, the total Tohoku aquaculture production is 270,000 tons, which is 23% of the total Japanese figure. And Tohoku accounts for roughly one half of the Japanese aquaculture production for scallops. And Miyagi and Iwate prefectures put together account for 29% of oysters. And it has the entire share for Japan for Hoya, that is sea skirt. And for Wakame seaweed, putting together Iwate and Miyagi, they almost have are dominating the entire share in Japan. And with regard to nori seaweed, Kyushu is the main production area. So Miyagi accounts only for about 7.8%.
で、青森はこれは陸奥湾ですから、この青森は被害を受けなかったと考えてください。ですから 23% から 7.5% を引いたのが被害を受けたパーセンテージだと考えてください。
As for Aomori Prefecture, their main production port is Mutsu, which has not been damaged by the disasters. And therefore, you can subtract Aomori's part, 7.5%, from the Tohoku's share of 23%, and that will be the extent of the damage by the recent disasters.
から漁業生産量で見ますとですね、大体生産金額で見ますと漁業ではですね 13% ぐらいを占めますし、養殖では金額が 11% ですね。トータルでは 12% ですね。
In terms of fisheries production value, in terms of the fisheries, Tohoku accounts for 13%, and for aquaculture, Tohoku accounts for 11%. And putting those two together, Tohoku accounts for 12% of the total.
から加工だとか冷蔵庫の能力ですけど、冷蔵庫の能力はですね、全体が日本全体で160万トンの能力があるんですが、57万5000トンで約3割を占めます。その他の加工業はだいたい15% ぐらいの能力ですね、ウェイトです。
Now, turning to chilling facilities and processing facilities. In terms of the chilling facilities, the total Japanese capacity is 1.6 million tons, and Tohoku accounts for 30% with 570,000 tons. And in terms of the processing capacity, Tohoku's share is about 15%.
ですから多分外国からのですね、輸入された原料は一回東北のどっかに水揚げされる傾向があると言えると思います。
So the materials which are being imported, the raw materials which are being imported by Japan from foreign countries, there is a tendency that they will land first somewhere in Tohoku.
それから東北のですね、漁業のその形態の数ですが、2万4000形態があったのがですね、2008年の統計ではですね、1万6000に減少しました。
And as for the number of fishing operations, in 1988 there used to be 24,906, but this number has decreased to 16,590 in the year 2008.
それから売上高で見ますとですね、この1万6000、形態のですね、ほとんどが1000万円未満の売上しかありません。すごく小さい、会社または個人事業で占められております。
In terms of the sales of the fishing operations, they are mostly quite small and less than 10 million yen per operation. So they're mainly small-sized companies or individual fishermen.
それから専業の漁業だけをやっている人がこの中で 39.5% です。
Dedicated fishing operations account only for 39.5%.
それから漁業が主たる収入の場合が兼業が 17.2% ですね。
And for households which have double income, but still the fishing income being the main income, those type of operations account for 17.2%.
それから漁業がセカンダリーの場合が 11.5% ですね。
And for those operations whose fishing income is only supplementary income, account for 11.5%.
それから労働者が65歳以上がですね、46.6% です。
And the more than 65 years old age bracket amongst the fishing workers is 46.6%.
で、これがですね、後継者がいますかと尋ねた場合に、いると答えた人がですね、緑。それからいないと答えた人がですね、赤ですね。で、例えば私の生まれ故郷の岩手で見ますと、後継者がいる人はですね、これ見ますと 20% ですね。
So this graph reflects the response received to the question of whether you have successors to the fishing operations. And those who responded yes is shown in green, and those who responded no is shown in red. For instance, in my hometown of Iwate Prefecture, you can see that those fishing operations who do have successors only account for about 20%.
で、宮城県が同様にこれだと 32% ですかね。
And the same for Miyagi would be about 32%.
日本全体で見ても多分25% ぐらいだと思います。
And if we try to have the same graph for entire Japan, perhaps the green part would only be about 25%.
からこれがですね、緑がその年にですね、新しく漁業に入ってきた新規参入者の数ですね。
This graph shows new entrants, and the green bar shows the new entrants who have entered the fisheries industry in that year.
それから赤がですね、その年に漁業をやめた人の数ですね。だいたい1万人から8000人ぐらいですね。
And the red bar shows the number of fishing workers who have withdrawn from fisheries. And you can see that they number about 8,000 or 10,000 per year.
で、これがノルウェーとですね、比べた場合の年齢構成ですが、ノルウェーの場合はですね、39歳以上の若い人が 40% いますが、日本の場合はですね、12% ですね。
This is a comparison in terms of the age composition amongst the fisheries workers between Norway and Japan. And the green part shows the under 39 years old age bracket. And Norway's green part shows 40%, whereas in the case of Japan, it's only 12%.
それで、これがその数で示した場合のですね、全体に東北に3万4000人いるんですが、ほとんどその年を取った人ばっかりが漁業をやってるっていうことが分かります。
In Tohoku region, the total number of fisheries workers is 34,776, and you will be able to see the number for each age bracket, and you will be able to see that most of the fisheries workers in Tohoku are the elderly.
で東北の全体のですね、後継者がいるパーセンテージは 24.9% です。
And the share of the fisheries operations who do have successors account for 24.9%.
で今度の津波と地震でですね、この 24.9% が残念ながらもっと小さくなっているのが現実ですね。
As a result of the tsunami as well as the earthquake disasters recently, this share of 24.9% has unfortunately shrunk further.
ですから今までと同じそのシステムだとか制度だとかで同じ対策を取っていけばですね、日本の東北地方の漁業は次第になくなるっていうのが明らかです。
And therefore, if we try to reapply exactly the same system, the same policies to Tohoku region fisheries industry for its reconstruction, then it is evident that eventually fisheries will disappear from Tohoku region.
それで、それでは困るのでですね、私たちはですね、特に私は自分の生まれ故郷をですね、何度も訪ねてますし、東北は大体隅から隅まで行ってますから、東北地方をですね、廃れさせないために何をやるべきかということを考えた、それを今日ご紹介したいと思います。
But I would not want the fisheries vanish from Tohoku region. And since I have my hometown in this region and I have really visited every corner of the Tohoku region, I do not want the Tohoku region to decline. And therefore, I have some policy recommendations which I would like to share with you today.
で、まず一つは短期的な対策ですけども、今漁場にたくさんの瓦礫があります、ガーベージがありますので、やはりこの掃除をしなくちゃなんないんですが、魚の量も変わってますし生態も変わってますから、ちゃんと調査をしたらどうかと思います。
First, starting with short-term measures, as for the fishing ground, they are covered by garbage and debris, and therefore we need cleanup. However, before doing so, we need to conduct a thorough study because there have been many changes in terms of the fisheries resource amount as well as the ecological system.
それからイカダがほとんど養殖のケージが流されましたし、漁船もなくなりましたから、協業化だとか共同経営にしていって、将来会社の組織になるような下地を作ることが大事で、漁業者だけじゃなくてですね、加工だとか、それからその他のビジネスの人も加える必要があると思います。
Most of the rafts, cages used for aquaculture, they have been washed away, and so have the fishing boats. And therefore, in terms of the reconstruction, we need to make sure that the fishing operations would take the form of cooperatives or joint operations, so that we'll be able to sort of create a basis for future companies, fishing companies. And therefore, in this process, not only the fishermen, but also people from other sectors, such as processing, as well as other types of business, should be involved.
でこの点は会議でですね、復興のための会議で宮城県知事も同じように提言しています。
And in the Reconstruction Council, the governor of Miyagi Prefecture made exactly the same recommendation.
それから私はですね、この際、船ができるまでの間、水産業の先進地のですね、ノルウェーだとかアイスランドだとかニュージーランドだとかですね、オーストラリアに行って、少し研修をしてきたらいいんじゃないかと思います。
Until the time that the fishing boats are rebuilt and ready for operation, I think it would serve the purpose of the fisheries industry people if they can take this opportunity to maybe go and study, train in those countries which are known to be far advanced in fisheries industry, such as Norway, New Zealand, and Australia.
それから若い人をですね、招き入れる、地域外の労働力を招き入れるという努力もしなければなりません。
And we must also make the effort to try to attract and invite young-aged labor from outside the region.
それから中長期的な対策としてはですね、これもっと時間がかかっていきますけれども、一つはその拠点、中心となる都市を特定してですね、グループで再生を図る必要があると思います。
Now, moving on to the medium and long-term policy recommendations, although this might be a more time-consuming process, we need to identify a city which would serve as the center for a group of different towns in that area, for the entire area to be reconstructed.
例えば気仙沼と大船渡はですね、一つのリージョンでいいと思いますし、4番目に書きました石巻と塩釜は一つのリージョンとしてまとめ上げた方がいいと思います。
Let me give you some examples. Kesenuma and Ofunato, they should be treated as one region. And Ishinomaki and Shiokama, they should also be handled as a single region.
それから水揚げ施設とですね、それから岸壁と市場と、それからその加工だとか冷蔵庫の整備はですね、やはりその漁業と一体的に行う必要があります。
And as for the development of the landing facilities, the quays and the market, as well as the chilling facilities, processing facilities, they should be redeveloped in a manner which is integrated with the fisheries industry.
それから日本の行政のシステムでは漁業の港とですね、漁業以外の港が全くバラバラに今作られてますので、それを一体的に作る、修復する考えに修正すべきと思います。
Under the Japanese administrative system, fishing ports are constructed entirely separately from ports serving other functions. But in terms of the reconstruction, it would be much better if the fishing port and the non-fishing port functions can be integrated.
それから今も石巻と気仙沼がですね、例えば漁船を自分のところに来なさいと 誘致の無駄な合戦をしています、争いをしてますけども、こういうことをやめるシステムを作り上げる必要があります。
Currently, for instance, Ishinomaki and Kesenuma, they are competing with each other in order to attract fishing boats. However, this is really a wasteful competition, and therefore we need to create a system in which these ports do not have to compete against each other.
それで、ここのカッコ3に書いたのはですね、各港の大きい気仙沼だとか石巻の港の能力、加工場の能力はピークに合わせてありますから、実際復興する能力はさっき漁獲量をお見せしましたけれども、今の私は半分で済むと思います。
And as for the major ports, Kesenuma and Ishinomaki, the port capacity as well as the processing capacity used to be at the level of the capacity of the fishing at the peak of the fisheries industry. However, as I showed you on the graph, the catch, the capacity has really declined. And therefore, in terms of the reconstruction of such facilities, we need to only think about achieving 1/2 the capacity which used to exist before the disasters.
それで内容の高度化っていうか、クオリティのアップを図る新しい工場を作るべきだと思います。
And we should try to enhance the level or the quality of the plants, the facilities which will be reconstructed.
それから今度はもっと小さいですね、漁村についてお話ししたいと思います。
Now let me turn your attention to smaller sized fishing villages.
日本の漁村は非常に閉鎖的です。
Japanese fishing villages are very closed community.
それで、全国の普通の労働力や企業がですね、日本の漁村には今のままではですね、入っていけません。
And therefore, outside labor or outside companies from all over Japan will not be able to enter the fishing villages under the existing system.
でまず第一にですね、海洋水産資源は、地域全体、日本国民全体のものとして位置づけるべきだと考えます。
First of all, marine resources, so fisheries resources, should be regarded as an asset for the entire Japanese people.
今、日本の漁業者はですね、自分のものだと思っています。
However, the Japanese fishermen nowadays feel that the fisheries resources belong to them alone.
それから2番目にですね、養殖の漁業権というのは日本独特のユニークなシステムです。これを区画漁業権と言っています。それから定置網を敷設する漁業権もですね、あります。これも日本のですね、ユニークなシステムです。で、これはですね、従来は日本の漁業者、特に漁協を中心に許可がされてきました。
Now, secondly, turning to aquaculture, first of all, I have to explain to you that there exists the space fisheries rights, which is a system unique to Japan, and there is also the set net fisheries rights, which is also a system unique to Japan. And in the past, it was usually the Japanese fishermen or else the fisheries cooperatives who have been allocating the fisheries rights.
で、それをですね、漁業者だけじゃなくて、加工業者、それからリテイラー、それから大手の漁業会社、 または外からのですね、投資者のすべての人に許可を与えるべきと考えます。
However, the fisheries rights should be given not only to the fishermen but also to processing industry as well as retailers as well as the large-scale companies, fisheries companies from outside, as well as investors from outside.
から3番目ですが、船がなくなったわけですから、ある程度ですね、漁船を大型化して、漁船数をですね、さっき写真で私の田舎も見せましたけれども、削減する必要があって、この際、漁業者間の共同化、会社化を図るべきだろうと思います。
And the third point is that since the fishing boats have been all washed away by the tsunami, I think this would be a good opportunity to enlarge the average size of the fishing vessels by decreasing the total number of fishing vessels. I showed you a photo from my hometown showing small boats, but we need to decrease the overall number of the fishing vessels, and therefore we need to sort of create cooperatives or create companies which would share such boats.
で、養殖業も大型化、近代化を図るべきと思います。
And in terms of aquaculture, they should also be enlarged in size and modernized.
で、ちょっと耳慣れない言葉を今ずっと話しましたけれども、日本には漁業法がありますが、この漁業法っていうのはですね、民主化を目的で定められました。
Perhaps some of the jargon I have been using you're not accustomed to, but in Japan we have the fisheries law, and the purpose of this law was to achieve democratization.
要するに資源の持続的科学的根拠に基づく持続的利用の、考え方はですね、現在の漁業法には一つも明確に書かれてません。
In the existing fisheries law, there is no explicit mention whatsoever of the sustainable use of fisheries resources based on science.
それで漁業権っていうのがですね、大きく3つあります。一つは共同漁業権で10年ごとに更新するんですが、一種の畑みたいな概念で、その自分のですね、村の前にあるですね、そのアワビだとか、貝類だとか、それからワカメ、海藻類をですね、その共同で取るその漁業権のことを言いまして、これは漁業協同組合に属している人だけが排他的に取れるわけです。
There are three categories of fisheries rights. The first is the joint fisheries right, which is renewed every 10 years. So this is kind of like splitting up the different fields and parties in terms of agriculture. In front of the fishing village, there is this space for instance, the abalone and seashells and wakame seaweed, and the joint fisheries right is to sort of jointly produce these things by aquaculture, and such rights are being allocated by the fisheries cooperatives.
で、次が定置漁業権ですが、これはですね、定置網を敷設してですね、マグロだとか鮭だとかをですね、漁獲する権利でありまして、5年ごとに更新されます。
The second right is the set net fisheries right. That is the right to set the set nets for fishing tuna and salmon. And this right is renewed every 5 years.
それから最後がですね、区画漁業権。別な言葉で言うと養殖漁業権でありまして、これも10年ごとに更新されます。
And the next right is the space fisheries right, that is to say, right for aquaculture. And this is also renewed every 10 years.
で、一定の小さいスペースをですね、漁業者がですね、もらってっていうか使用する権利を与えられてですね、そこで、魚類だとか貝類を養殖するわけであります。
That is to say, the fisherman would be given a small space, or would be given the right to use that space, and then will get involved in aquaculture for certain fish or shellfish.
それでこの区画漁業権と3番目と1番目の共同漁業権ですね、コミュニティベースドフィッシャリーライトはですね、1回最初にですね、都道府県から漁業協同組合に許可されます。
The third fisheries right, the space fisheries right, and the first fisheries right, which is sort of like a joint or a community-based fisheries right. Initially, these fisheries rights are given by the prefectural government to the fisheries cooperatives.
それでそのフィッシャリーコーポレーティブのメンバーがですね、そのフィッシャリーコーポレーティブからそれを使う権利をですね、与えられるというシステムです。
This is a system in which the fisheries cooperatives will then give the right to use that space to the members of the fisheries cooperatives.
それで今養殖のですね、漁業権の参入の順位、これ免許の順位っていうのがですね、第1位、第2位、第3位と書いてあるコラムがあると思うんですね。黄色のコラムのここですけども、実は養殖の権利をですね、まず最初にもらえるのが今言ったように漁協ですね、漁業協同組合で、普通の個人だとか法人が第3位なんですね。普通の会社の人が養殖を営みたいと言ったってですね、どんな立派な会社でも法律に1番目は漁協に許可を与えると日本の漁業法では書いてありますから、こっちが仮に経営能力が全くなくて、こっちが経営能力が優れてもこっちの方に行くシステムになっているのが問題なんです。
And here in this yellow section, we have the ranking in terms of the order of priority to whom the fisheries right or the license for the aquaculture is given. And it says the first priority will be given to the fisheries cooperatives. And the third rank is individuals and corporations. Which conduct aquaculture. So this is written in the law, in the fisheries law, that priority will be given to the fisheries cooperatives. And therefore, even if the fisheries cooperatives were inferior in terms of managing the operations, and even if the companies are much better in terms of the operating, still in the law, here in Japan, it is explicitly written that priority must be given to the cooperatives.
それでまず次の私らの提言ですけれども、漁業協同組合はですね、今経営の危機にありますので、この組合をですね、いつまでも漁協のままにしておくんじゃなくて、地域のですね、加工業の人だとか造船だとかいろんな関連業者の人たちを入れてですね、そこに漁業者も入ってですね、地域の中核になるその組合に変わった方がいいというその考えを私たちは持っています。
The recommendation that I would like to give is that the fisheries cooperatives are faced with a crisis in terms of their management, and therefore they should not remain as they are. But it is my recommendation that they should ask other processors or shipbuilders from the regional community to join the cooperatives so that they can sort of serve as the central entity in terms of the regional industry.
それから漁業権が今1回漁業協同組合に許可されるのをですね、この県から直接その会社に許可したり市町村に許可して市町村がですね地域産業振興の観点からですね、実際の企業に許可する方式の方がいいんじゃないかと思っています。これはもともとですね GHQ の提案でした。
今のが
この今私が説明したのは。
今の提言が。
はい。
As for the fisheries right, my recommendation is that rather than being given to the fisheries cooperatives first, the prefectural government should give the right directly to companies or else the municipal governments in order to promote the local industry. That would be a much better way. And this was originally recommended by the GHQ.
それからですね、東北海域の、漁獲の能力をですね、もうピークの半分以下にセットアップするというのが大事だと思います。
I think it'd be crucial to set the fishing capacity of the Tohoku waters at one half the level of the peak.
で今マサバだとかマイワシの資源状態が悪いですから、これをこの機会に回復のそのシナリオに載せることだと思います。
The resource situation of mackerel as well as sardines are quite bad at the moment, and therefore we should try to pursue a scenario to achieve recovery in such marine resources.
でこの際ですからタクの設定を厳格にしながら ITQ を導入すべきだと考えます。
And therefore, we should have more strict administration of the TAC, the total allowable catch, and also introduce ITQ, the individual transferable quota.
それから多分このまま操業すると三陸沖の漁船は石巻だとか気仙沼に水揚げしない可能性があると思いますので、その港ごとの加工枠を設定した方がいいと思います。
In terms of the fishing vessels which are operating in the sea area of Sanriku Oki, there is high likelihood that they would choose not to land their catch in Ishinomaki or Kesenuma port. And therefore, we should set up a processing quota for each port.
多分漁船はですねラディエーションの問題があってですね、もっと南の勝浦にですね水揚げすると思います。
Because the fishing boats they are suffering from radiation problem, they would prefer to land in Katsura port, which is located further south.
千葉ですね。
In Chiba Prefecture.
ITQ の制度を説明したのがこのペーパーですが、これは割愛します。
This PowerPoint explains how the ITQ system works, but I will skip over this.
それから漁業協同組合について解説をしたのが次のそのグラフ表でありますが、漁業協同組合がですね、できる事業についてここに書いてありますが、これも参考にしてもらいたいと思います。で、ここにはですね、漁業協同組合漁協があって 県のですね、漁連があって全漁連があるというこのハイラルキーを示しています。
The PowerPoint that I have skipped over gives the list of the activities that fisheries cooperatives are able to engage in. And this organizational chart shows the setup of the fisheries cooperatives, how they are existing 3 tiers, the fisheries cooperatives, and then the Prefectural Association of Fisheries Cooperatives, and then the National Federation of the Japanese Fisheries Cooperative Associations.
で一つ強調したいのはですね、漁業協同組合というのはあくまで組合員に奉仕することが目的だというのをですね、法律の4条で書いてあります。
One point that I wish to emphasize is that the very objective of the fisheries cooperatives is to provide service to the cooperative members, and that is written in Article 4 of the law.
ところがさっき言いましたように漁業者組合員がですね、経営が破綻しているにもかかわらずですね、組合員を助ける業務をですね、漁協として十分に行っていません。
However, as I was explaining earlier on, despite the fact that the members of the cooperatives may have gone bankrupt in terms of their operations, the cooperatives are unable to do anything to assist such members.
それで、これがちょっと見にくいんですけれども、漁協自身もですね、経営破綻をしております。で、これがですね、漁業協同組合日本全体のですね、事業の利益ですね。漁協は魚を組合員の魚を売ることができますが、それらの本当に必要な事業でですね、マイナスになってますけれども、事業外の利益、これがですね、政府からの補助金であったり、それから保証金であったり、電力会社の保証金であったり、空港建設の保証金であったりですね、いろんな保証金をもらったりですね、それから銀行業務のですね、利益がプラスになってですね、ここ見えないんですけども、事業としてはプラスになっています。でも本質はここなんでですね、漁協がですね、ここで自立するというやり方を模索すべきであって、これだともう政府だとかですね、民間企業の補助金投入で漁協が成り立っているということになるわけです。
This graph might be a bit difficult to see, but it shows that the cooperatives, the fisheries cooperatives themselves are almost bankrupt. This is the total figure for entire Japan, but in this light blue line shows the profit and loss situation for the business activities by the fisheries cooperatives, and that is to say, selling, marketing the fish which has been caught by the cooperative members, and it's in the negative domain. But for the non-business profit and loss, that is to say, subsidies they receive from the government, as well as the compensation they're receiving from electric power companies, and also for airport construction, and they are also involved in financial business, and that is also generating a profit. So overall, the fisheries cooperatives do enjoy a surplus. However, we have to really look at their essential business, and the cooperatives must make the effort to try to make a profit in their core business of selling fish, because unless they can do that, they are just surviving by receiving subsidies from the government as well as the private sector.
で私たちが提言するシステムだとですね、プライベートカンパニーのですね、投資も誘発できると思います。でこの際ですから私はですね、例えば漁業の分野ではアメリカやニュージーランドが 25% までの投資を認めてますし、それから水産加工流通業では 100% まで可能ですから、あまり政府の財政、投入だけじゃなくてですね、民間の資金を活用する新しい制度にですね、 変えていく必要があると、それを私たちは今主張しておりますし、宮城県知事もそのような主張をしております。
The new system that I would like to recommend is a system which would attract investment from private companies. For instance, if we look at how the fisheries industries are managed in the United States and New Zealand, they allow investment from outside to the threshold of 25%, and they will allow investment without threshold for the distribution industry and the processing industry. And therefore, in terms of building, we should try to change the existing system and build a new system which would not rely on money from the government alone, but which would be able to attract funding from the private sector. That is what I am recommending, and that is also what the governor of Miyagi Prefecture is recommending.
それから放射能と水産業はですね、やはりその東京電力からインディペンダントなですね、調査能力を水産のセクターが持つべきでありますし、場合によっちゃ外国とのコラボレーションをですね、もっと強化すべきだと思います。
This PowerPoint has to do with radiation and the fisheries industry. The fisheries industry in Japan should have research capacity independent from TEPCO. Depending on the case, we should also consider possible collaboration with foreigners.
ほとんど内部被曝等に関する情報も含めてですね、水産の研究者はほとんど情報を持ってないというのが問題です。
It is a problem that the fisheries industry researchers have not received any information, including the information with regard to internal radiation exposure.
はい、ありがとうございます。
Thank you for your attention.